The waters lifted me, now safe am I. Love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All right, do the sound masters have us back there? The sound and sight masters have us ready. You got it, Brother Cloud. Session 32. Ready to roll?
We're talking about modesty and clothing. We've been looking at 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 9 and 10, the woman's clothing, the modesty, various aspects of that we've been looking at. And I wanted to mention, we're just hitting highlights, of course, of these things, but I wanted to mention the tight, clinging attire is as immodest as skimpy attire. And I think this is something that's not talked about very much or even understood sometimes, maybe on the part of women, but tight, clinging attire is as immodest as skimpy attire because the woman's figure is emphasized and accented, and that's just what the man wants to see, which is forbidden outside of marriage to be focused on that kind of thing. But men, the Bible tells us, are strongly influenced sexually by the eye gate and attracted to the woman's curves. And that's the fact of life. And the immodest clothing industry knows that very well. And they want to dress women seductively rather than modestly. That's their goal. They don't care about modesty. So it's important to understand this, that the tight, form-fitting clothes can be just as sexually disturbing to a man as the skimpy clothes. And of course, that's where we are, especially today. In the book For Women Only, What You Need to Know About the Inner Lives of Men, Shaunti Feldhahn, she's writing about these things, but another husband with a happy 20-year marriage described another typical scenario. My wife and I recently went out to dinner at a nice restaurant with some friends. The hostess was extremely attractive and was wearing form-fitting clothes that showed off a great figure. For the rest of the night, it was impossible not to be aware that she was across the restaurant, walking around. Our group had a great time with our lovely wives, but I guarantee you that our wives didn't know that every man at that table was acutely aware of that woman's presence and was doing his utmost not to look in her direction. Godly men will try not to, but you understand that? And so in our survey of Christian men, we did a survey of Christian men for dressing with the Lord, dressing for the Lord. Another survey we did, and we asked about tight clothing. And no, we didn't ask about tight clothing. We just wanted feedback about women's dress and how it might affect you, men. We got lots of feedback, but one thing that just kept being hammered was that tight clothing was as much of a potential problem for men as skimpy clothing. And one man said, I would say the number one problem in any garment that is form-fitting, be it jeans, pants, skirt, dress, shirt, whatever, anything that is tight, no matter how long it is, leaves nothing to the imagination, and that defeats the whole purpose of covering the skin in the first place. And then another said, you don't even need to see skin. They provide all the curves by those tight clothing. Another man said, I would say number one problem is any garment that's form-fitting. Another one said, one thing I see in my church is tight clothing in my church. It may very well be covering, but it's revealing the shape of a woman. This can be even more tantalizing to a man. So these are men talking. There's just a few of them. Another said, the point is that it's not merely the type of clothing that can trip a man up. Rather, it's the amount and the level of clean to the body. There's his standards for immodesty. The amount of clothing and the level of clean, the figure. And we've seen that this whole thing of tight pants, skinny pants, was designed by bisexual, and homosexual fashion designers. And when Calvin Klein's super tight pants appeared in 1974, they sold 200,000 pairs in the first week. And they exploded into the culture. But this tights worn as pants. So here you've got tights, which is like, should be your bedroom clothing. But the tights worn as pants. I remember the first time I saw that was in France. And I was visiting the great museum in Paris, the Louvre Museum, and there were women there. France is famous for its fashion, of course, and famous for beautiful women, too, I'll tell you. And there they were, and they were not wearing anything but tights. And that was the first time I saw it, years ago. But it's exploded, and it's just common now. Nobody thinks anything. I got my tights on. Yeah, but really, you're naked, you know. Don't you know that? Might as well be the way it affects a man. Godly women who understand what a temptation tight clothing is for man, surely they'll be careful to avoid this type of attire. One man wrote, when I see a woman in a store in town when she's dressed in a certain conservative way, I always think, I bet she's a Christian. It says a lot about the character of a woman when she shuns the styles of this world and walks in such a way she wants to let people know that she is different. She is different. And if somebody asks you how you dress, you need to be ready to tell them. I've got some biblical reasons here. I love the Lord. I love the Bible. I want to follow the Bible, and here's my biblical reasons for modest dress. Yes. And so I wanted to deal, when we're dealing with this issue of clothing, and there's several points here, 7 points altogether in our study on the Christian's clothing in the 2023 edition of Keeping the Kids. But I wanted to emphasize that one point about the temptation to men of tight clothing.